7-figure grand from across the room. I see your patience are short with all these dancing fools. I see that you're the type of girl that likes a tattoo. I seen the way you looked at me when I came walking through. So don't hesitate, blow a single night left alone, and don't let the night go. Now don't let it go. Don't wanna be a freak, I wanna make you scream. Come get it like a freak. Take my hand, we had it till we're weak. Oh, life is like a dream. Come and get it like a freak.
All right, this is Mike.
And Kelsey.
We're at the Twisted Hour here on WBUZ 95. We want to welcome you all to the show tonight. This is our first show. We have two very cool guests tonight. We have Tim Weaver, who is one of the very few people in the world that does infrared photography.
And we also have Marian, a model with the Twisted Angels Alternative Modeling Group.
All right. We are going to go pay some bills with some ads, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes. Peace.
More than 2 million Americans have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the Department of Veterans Affairs reports that approximately 11 to 20% of those warriors may have experienced symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. As we recognize PTSD Awareness Month, Real Warriors campaign volunteer Meg Mitchum, a former Army combat medic who served in Iraq, encourages fellow warriors to reach out when they need help.
The hardest step was admitting that I needed help coping with PTSD. Once I did, my command and unit fully supported me, and I was able to get the care I needed. Getting support helped me succeed in the military and now in my civilian career.
If you or a loved one is coping with an invisible wound, resources are available and they work. For more information, visit the Real Warriors campaign at realwarriors.net or call 866-966-1020.
Hi, this is Nicolas Cage. When you're a teenager, there are a lot of things going on that can produce stress and anxiety. The pressures of school, dating, and the future in general can seem overwhelming sometimes. But there are healthy ways to deal with stress, ways to reduce it and channel your energy in positive directions, and you don't have to do it alone. The Will Rogers Institute has a free booklet with some really helpful information.
For your free copy, visit wrinstitute.org and find us on Facebook and Twitter.
All right, we want to welcome you back to the Twisted Hour. This is Mike and Kelsey, and we have Tim from Arizona. He's well known for his IR photography, infrared photography, and he's very unique. There's not many people do that. I don't think there's really anybody else, at least in the United States, that does it. And we also have Marian. She's an alternative model with the Twisted Angels, and she's worked with Tim, and she's going to share some of her stories with us as well. Let's start off today just by welcoming you guys to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, then. So what got you into infrared photography, and could you tell us a little bit about it for someone who might not know what it is?
Well, infrared is the light spectrum that is above the visible spectrum that we can see in our daily lives. So you've got the bottom end of the spectrum, you got UV light, and then you get into visible light, all of the different colors in the spectrum there. And then when you start getting up into the 690, 700 nanometer wavelength light spectrum, you start losing the ability to actually see that light. And what the infrared camera has done has been altered to remove the filter that blocks infrared light from most digital sensors, and throwing an additional filter that only allows infrared light into the camera or on the front of the lens, depending on how the camera is converted, then allows you to capture light that we wouldn't normally be able to see, and how it reflects off of various things like foliage or vehicles or tattoos, which is what I specialize in.
Awesome. And how did you come across it? Did you just kind of stumble into it, or did you see something that inspired you to try it out, trial and error, or? I've
seen a lot of infrared landscape photography, and a friend of mine had a couple of cameras that had been converted. I started getting into portrait photography pretty heavily in early 2015 and borrowed his cameras and decided to give it a try just because it was different and see how it came out. And I really liked the effect. Probably about a year later, I went to an annual event that we have here in Arizona called the Junkyard Shoot, and shot infrared almost the entire day there. And one of the things I discovered very quickly in editing was how the ink in tattoos reacts to infrared light and its contrast with the skin. And so I just started doing a lot more photography with tattoo models, and finally figured out a process to edit them how I liked. I'm a contrarian by nature, so it's something nobody else was doing, and I thought, why not?
Well, yeah, and that being said, do you find it easier or more creative or more challenging working with alternative models with all the ink and everything versus, say, a mainstream model that doesn't have any ink? I mean, how does that impact how you do your shooting in terms of, because you said you convert the cameras? Is it something that you're doing that's an easy conversion, that they actually make the equipment and stuff to do that, or is something you have to kind of jerry rig it? How are you doing that?
Well, in front of the digital sensors and cameras, there is what they call a hot mirror filter. And what that does is that blocks the UV light out on the top end. So if one is handy with electronics, I know of people who have converted their own cameras, but generally people will either purchase a pre-converted camera or send a camera into one of a couple of companies that will do the conversion for you, and that's what I did. My first conversion was a Sony NEX5 that I purchased to have a small mirrorless camera to go on a vacation. And when I got back, I converted that, and that's what I started shooting with. I had that one converted as full spectrum, which basically would allow everything from UV on the bottom end all the way up to the top end of infrared. And then depending on what filter you put in front of the lens, you can change the effect. So if I had a UV passband filter, I could have it shoot only in the UV spectrum. They do make a hot mirror filter, so I can shoot regular photography with it. And then I have several different wavelength IR filters that I put on the front of the lens and I can get different effects.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
As far as shooting, I shoot tattooed models and non-tattooed models and clients pretty much the same way. It's the editing process that really makes a lot more of a difference. But in terms of how I light it and how I shoot it, there's very little difference. Sometimes I'll do a few things differently if I'm trying to emphasize veins, which infrared photography can bring out. Other than that.
Now, with what you were doing there, with Marian, for example, Marian, when you're looking at what you do, and as part of your portfolio, because Tim's very unique, how did you two meet? How did you guys meet? Because you traveled out to Arizona, and you have family out there, so you're out there and you work with some photographers while you're out there. How did you meet with Tim?
She saw me on a street corner with a sign that said, "We'll photograph the food." And offered me a sandwich.
His legs, man, his legs got it for me. You should see his calves. They're built pretty nice.
Yeah.
No, actually, I had Tim has worked with a couple of models that I followed on Instagram, Taisha and Inked Amelia, and I saw a lot of work that he had been posting from the girls that I was following, and I noticed that he was in Phoenix, and my cousin, who I'm very close with, is in the same area. So I complimented his work, and I started following him. He followed me back, and then, I sent him a message and said, "Hey, I'm going to be out in Arizona in October around the junkyard shoot," and I asked him if he wanted to try and shoot, and he said, "Yeah, absolutely." So just from following each other and supporting each other's work, we just hit it off right away, became friends, and that's essentially it. And anytime I come out to Arizona, Tim's the first one I tell.
That's
because,
cool.
We
see the party. Yeah.
That's very
He's the first person I set up shoots with.
Well, that's what she tells me anyway.
The checks in the mail.
My cousin's the first to know that I'm coming out there. Tim's the second.
Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha. Now,
So what's it like working with Tim? I mean, he seems like a blast so far to me, but I mean, from a professional aspect, when you're shooting, what was it like to work with him and kind of get him, from a model's perspective with the infrared?
Instantly,
what was that like?
Instantly comfortable. I was already comfortable with him from the beginning because I already had a chance to talk to him and get to know him and everything. But Tim is very charismatic, and his sarcasm is like home for me. So we got along immediately. We hit it off. But Tim is extremely professional. Once he gets started, he's very focused on his work. He's very quick. He knows his lighting. He knows his angles. He knows what he's looking for. I needed very little direction. I mean, that just could be because I'm experienced. But if he wanted me to do a certain pose or move a certain way, he was very clear about it. It's just a lot of fun. We were able to shoot for hours and not realize that we had spent so much time. So,
and that happens a lot too, right? Yeah, and that happens a lot too, because as you're shooting, and if you have that, I guess that connection that you're really working really well. Next thing you know, you've shot for several hours, and you say, well, I've got a couple hours I can kill here, and we've got that, and the next thing you know, you're 4 hours later, like, oh my God, I can't believe we're shooting for 4 hours. It kind of gets away from you, and that's kind of the best kind of shoot that you ever get involved with. The ones that you're not like looking at the clock saying, are we done yet? It's the ones where you look at it and you're like, oh my God, we're way over our time and whatnot. So, but Marian, you said you're an experienced model and whatnot. How long have you been modeling, and have you always been an alternative model during that time frame, or did you start off as more of a mainstream and then kind of cross over or develop into, or morph, I guess, if you will, into an alternative model?
Well, I tried my hand at modeling when I was 19 for Suicide Girls. That didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to, because I didn't know people and I didn't understand the industry like I do now. So it was an experience to kind of learn a little bit, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do, but I wasn't at a place in my life or with my body where I was ready to just jump right into it. So I've actually been doing a lot more modeling for the last, I'd say, 3 years, but it's always kind of been alternative. It's always been alternative and tattoo focused and related.
Okay. Now, when you travel out to Arizona because you have family out there and you have the opportunity to work with Tim. Now, Tim, how often do you travel? Because I know you try to get around a little bit, but you have your day job. Okay, and yep. Marian's got her day job and everything, so and a lot of people have to juggle around that. So how often do you get a chance to travel around and kind of showcase the work that you do?
Let's see. Well, I went to Tucson last weekend. That's probably about it. I don't travel. There are a variety of reasons I don't necessarily like it, but I will if the situation calls for it. I had a job about 20 years ago where I traveled overseas on business about 30% of the time.
Oh, wow.
And so that whole travel thing has kind of lost its allure.
Yeah.
And, I don't really have reason to go other places, so it's nothing I've necessarily set up. It's, I'm not opposed to it.
Evidently, the dogs are opposed to it. They're as soon as you start talking about traveling, they started barking. They said, "Oh no!"
Yeah, no, I'm not opposed to it. I just need a reason for it, and there just hasn't been a reason to do it yet.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, do you find, Marian, when you're working with him, and obviously you have the IR work now part of your portfolio, okay? Which not a lot of people have that, right? So what kind of a reaction do you get when people see the images of you in IR versus your other images that you do, whether it's a cool edit or not, whether different effects and stuff? Obviously the IR is very unique to what other people edit and the things that they do. I mean, I'll do HDR, you can do the black and whites and all that other stuff, but obviously IR is very unique. How do people react to that in your portfolio?
First thing I hear is, "That's so cool." and then some people have been like, "Well, what filter did you use?" And I'm like, didn't use a filter. We used an infrared camera. It's unique. It's not something that you can just slap a filter on. But it's different. I've had a few magazines want to publish it, but because it's so different, like Inked Barbie wanted to publish one for us in her black and white issue, and the only reason it didn't go in is because infrared looks different from your traditional black and white, so it kind of stood out. But there are some magazines that have been toying with the idea of wanting to do an infrared specific issue. It's just a matter of finding when they want to do it and getting the people to do it.
Now, Tim, are there a lot of people that do infrared photography? Is it, or because you're the only one that I've really seen that does that kind of work? I mean, is there anybody else that you're aware of that does that kind of work?
Yeah, infrared photography has traditionally been used for landscape and architecture.
Right.
A lot of that has to do with how foliage comes out in infrared. Getting into infrared portrait work, that narrows it down a lot. I can tell you that I know of about 6, maybe 7 people in the world that do infrared photography as a regular part of their portfolio. Mm-hmm. 1 or 2 of them have done some tattoo work, but I don't know of any of them that do infrared tattoo photography to the extent that I do. There's some really good, there's a guy in Maryland by the name of Joe, and I don't remember how to pronounce his last name. I think it's Hodnot or Hottentot, something like that. Really nice guy. He does some really good portrait work, and he shoots a lot in infrared. And some of his work that he's done with some of the tattooed models is actually very cool. But he's even told me that he seems to think that I do it a lot more than anybody else has done.
Certainly more than anything I've seen. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. When you're setting up a shoot, is there something different that you look for when it's going to be an infrared as opposed to maybe just a more standard photo shoot? Like, how does your preparation differ?
It mostly has to do around clothing. Because,
textures and everything.
Yeah, because skin will always come out white. Tattoos will come out black in various shades of blue because of the wavelength that I shoot. And so what ends up being a unknown until I can really get the articles of clothing in front of me is how something will look in infrared from a clothing standpoint. Because infrared captures how IR light is reflected off of something and not a color that we see, what happens is that you can have, like a bikini, for example, exact same color and exact same pattern to the naked eye that we look at it and go, oh, those are the same, but maybe slightly different materials, or the dyes that were used to create a pattern on them were slightly different. Because of that difference, in infrared, they will come back as different colors. Conversely, I've seen 2 pieces of clothing that were identical fabric but different colors in visible light that show up exactly the same in infrared. So what I normally do is have a Kleiner model will lay out their outfits, and I'll photograph them with a flash, just real quick and dirty, and see how they're looking under infrared to see kind of what goes together. So I've pulled pieces that you look at them in visible light and you're like going, oh, why are you putting those 2 together? But in infrared, they happen to work well together. So it might be a shade of gray. I've had a black bodysuit that came out as gray, but the binding tape that's along the legs and the openings, because it's a different material, comes out as a light blue. So you get that contrast sometimes.
I never would have realized that was something that contributes in.
Yeah, and as far as tattoos go, the one thing that I have found is that lighter colors like light oranges, light reds, those essentially just disappear. So if I had a friend who's got some flowers tattooed on her shoulder. I think they're like a hibiscus or some tropical flower. And in visible light, they're very beautiful, nice delicate orange and light red, and a little bit of black ink for the stem and a couple of the internal flower parts, whatever they're called. But when I took a photograph of it in infrared, pretty much everything except the black ink disappeared. So it really wouldn't make a good photo. So when I'm looking at a person's tattoos, I'll see, is there enough black ink to like outline the item that, whatever it is they have, whether it's a Hello Kitty tattoo or a skull, and whether it's shaded and what color it's shaded. And I can pretty much say, okay, well, these greens will come out as a really nice dark blue. This light red will just kind of disappear. That also happens with makeup as well, which I discovered, especially lipstick.
Now, do you find it easier to shoot in a controlled circumstance, like in a studio or indoors, versus outdoors? Because you said, and I think you and I have talked about this before, that it's, and you mentioned earlier that it's used primarily, or it had been anyway, used for landscape and architectural work. How does that impact you when you have the landscape or maybe architecture around an individual that you're focusing on? Is it, what kind of challenges do they pose?
Shooting outside poses challenges in terms of how foliage comes out and how the sky comes out. Depending on the ultimate white balance I end up using to create the skin effect that I have. I've had sky turn out sort of a burnt orange. I've had sky come out as a sort of a vermilion yellow. Generally speaking, green foliage will come out as white. Trees, they can come out kind of as a brown or kind of a purple. So if I do some post-processing that kind of follows along what some landscape photographers do, it can create a completely different look. I shot a model here, Crystal Singer, up in the forests above Payson, Arizona. And we did kind of a sort of a vampiric Little Red Riding Hood theme. And I had an underpowered flash at the time, so that didn't help. But when I got it into Photoshop, I decided to do a couple of things in terms of that landscape photographers do to kind of bring back a blue sky and create some gold foliage if you're using a certain filter. And by doing that and then painting her back into the normal way that I would normally edit her, it gave it kind of a ghostly appearance. And I can send you a copy of that, one of those images, so you can see.
Well, yeah, and we're going to have we have some of your work on our site and everything for people to see, so they can check it out too. So that'll be really kind of neat too. So for them to kind of
definitely indoors. In a studio or in a hotel room or a person's home, it's a lot easier because I can control the light. All the light is the same color temperature, which I know is important in color photography, but it also can have an effect in infrared. Not quite as much, but if I shoot outside, like up at the junkyards, I get sometimes a completely different look than I would if I had shot that same thing in a studio. But I shoot with flash outside all the time.
Oh, okay. All right.
What I do.
Now, when you're doing, I guess, like Kelsey had asked you earlier, you kind of, I guess, what's the word for it? You kind of, I don't want to say you stumbled into it, but it was something that caught your eye, and you decided to do that. Do you find yourself shooting more infrared than anything else, or at this juncture, or is it kind of half and half based on what your clients are looking for, or are they coming to you looking specifically for the infrared work that you do?
There was a period where I probably shot 85 to 90% of my work in infrared. Would have been most of 2016, part of 2017. Probably the last 8 months to a year, I've shot probably about 50-50, just because I was sort of losing my touch at the color photography game. And so now what I'll often do is shoot color and infrared during the same session. If we were looking to do something to publish, Mary and I will shoot a bunch of stuff in color, and then if stuff we just want to share because it's bitchin' looking, we'll do it in infrared and post those up. I've had a fair amount of my infrared work published, especially with Inktomelia. Had some stuff published with the shoot I did with Taisha Schmitz, Brooklyn Therese, and Smoke and Love, Stephanie Dunham. Shot the three of them together and separately, and had some of that stuff published as well. And then some of the stuff with Marian we've pushed out, but we've had some our color work published.
And actually, one of your images is being used for her for the Hell City Hotties.
Right, and one of my infrared images is being used by
Diamond Dahlia.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. So you have some of your color work and some of your infrared work there. That's cool.
Yeah, she actually asked to do some stuff in infrared during that photo shoot because she wanted to use it for the Hell City Hotties contest because it was different.
Oh, that's cool. Well, yeah, and it stands out when you're looking at the I guess the grid of the models that they have there and whatnot. Now, I know I was talking with a guy today and yesterday. His name is Mark Auger. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He does a lot of events and stuff like that out there, and he spoke very highly of you as well. I guess he works with some of the models that you've worked with, and he loves your work, and we were talking about that today because we might be doing some events out there with him. So I suspect that'll probably involve you guys as well, so but
okay.
And just based on the response that we've had with you coming in and kind of being part of the Twisted Angels family and the group and everything, everybody's like really excited and they love your work and everything. And of course Marian kind of she bullies them too. She says, you guys better like his work or else I will come to visit you.
Yeah, she twist their arms.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things I found with infrared photography is that within the modeling community is that models really like it because it's different.
Right.
It's unique. It's punchy. It's got a different aesthetic to it. Nobody else really has a whole lot of their work done that way. But it's very niche. And what I've discovered is that, models, in addition to modeling to get paid, they also model for portfolio work. And in modeling for portfolio work, infrared, I'm not sure necessarily helps sometimes because I, as a photographer, can look at something that, for example, a local photographer here in Arizona, Lucas Fenley, does some amazing work in color. And I mean, to the point where I can see a photo and go, that's one of his pieces. Mm-hmm. Well, a model can see his work and go, that's really cool. A photographer can see his work and go, that's really cool. I think I want to try something like that. And I may not get it exactly right. I may not have his editing process down or the way that he colorizes things, but I think I could get pretty close. I don't know that there's going to be a photographer that looks at one of the infrared photos I've done of Marian or Amelia or Taisha or Stephanie and go, yeah, I can do that. So,
well, yeah, I mean, I've been doing photography for 30 years, and when I saw your work, I'm like, that's really badass. But then, when we talk about it, it's one of those things. It's not an editing thing. It's an equipment thing. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're good, and I'm not going to even try and delve into that one. I'll let you do you on that one, and I'll stick to what I know. And but from my perspective too, just as as a photographer, I always look at what other people are doing and try to compare what I'm doing to them and how challenge myself to do those things. And there are some people you just simply recognize, like, I'm not going to be able to do that. And you're one of those people, for me anyway, that I look at your work and I'm like, yeah, that's just amazing work. And there's just what's the point in trying to duplicate him or do work like that, because I'd have miles to go in order to even try and play catch up, and by the time I get there, you're going to be 10 miles ahead of anywhere I'm at. But I know every time, like you said, it's very recognizable, especially with tattooed models, obviously, because of the pop. And I think a lot of people get the misconception when you're talking about infrared photography, they get that that green thing for goggles for when you're in the military and stuff like that. Yeah, they're thinking the night vision stuff. But they don't realize that it's got that not what you would expect. So it's got that really, like you said, the tattoos pop. And do you find that because they have a lot of different different hair colors and they play around with that kind of stuff, and even if they have multicolored hair, does that impact the way they're shot or how they edit it on the back end in post production?
Out a bit, but I kind of you dropped out a bit, but I heard the comment about hair and multicolored hair, so I'm guessing that the entire question surrounded that.
Yeah.
So how does hair come out in infrared?
Yes.
Interestingly, depending on the model's original hair color and how they perhaps have colored it, it can affect it. Generally speaking, I have found that brunettes will come out bluish color. Brunettes who dye their hair another dark color will come out a more vivid blue because the dye will reflect the light a bit more than just natural hair. Rainbow unicorn or sort of a bright red like Kiara Barnes out of Tucson, one of the other Twisted Angels in our group.
Yeah.
Those will come out platinum, just white.
Oh, okay.
Women with naturally blonde hair can kind of come out blonde to white. But yeah, it's pretty much either going to be blue or white, shade of blue, somewhere in between.
Oh, okay. All right. Mary, now you again, you are an alternative model and stuff like that, and you have your day job. How does your do you get a lot of reaction now compared to when you first started being a model to your day job? And I guess what I'm trying to say, the stigma attached to being an alternative model from 10 years ago, you had to cover up all your tattoos and stuff like that when you go to work. Do you find you have to deal with that now, or any kind of stigma that's attached to you with what you do?
Oh, no, not at all. I can show my tattoos off at all of my jobs. It's much more socially acceptable now. So that's not an issue at all. And just about all my coworkers know that, I'm running for Hell City Hotties and that, I'm an alternative model and that I'm published, and they've seen all of the work that me and Tim have done. And so everybody's very supportive. So I don't have an issue with the old-fashioned stigma that we, used to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's nice that society has really kind of grown a lot more accepting of body art and expression, because it used to be a big pain in the butt for some people having to cover up their tattoos, especially at work. Where is it that you work now for a day job, or what do you do other than model?
I'm not going to disclose the company that I work for, but I work in sales. I work for a technology company in sales. That's my primary job I've been doing for 7 years. And then I work part-time at a hospital as well, as an admissions receptionist. So I'm working with people all day long. And, it's my patients love it when they see my tattoos because it gives them something to talk about, because my patients are all older. They're generally stroke patients, so they're older. And then I meet tons of different people, different walks of life, different ages and stuff, and it brings up a lot of good conversation, gives me a chance to connect with people, which is good when you're in a sales environment. And then I'm a makeup artist when I'm not a model, so I'm dabbling in a little bit of everything.
One of the interesting things that Marian talked about, and you two had asked about how it is being accepted as an alternative model. As someone who has zero ink on my body, it's nothing I've never had to deal with. But I've grown up around, one of my friends is pretty heavily tattooed. It was just one of those things that people I knew had tattoos and it was no big deal. But not having to deal with it personally, it was never anything that I, suspected people really had to go through, except maybe in the military where, they had regulations in terms of what was visible. So, and I've heard about, some of the people that I've worked with, having to, I got to cover up when I go to work. And I was like, oh, well, why? It just seems weird to me.
Yeah. Well, it is, like Marian said, it's a lot more social, and Kelsey alluded to it too, that it's a lot more socially acceptable. 15 years ago, if you had tattoos, even coming into a photo shoot, if you came in with tattoos, people were like, oh, well, can you cover that up? Can you, Can you do this? Can we hide it? Can we pose you so we don't see it and stuff like that? And now, I mean, it's to the point now. It's like, who's got the cooler tattoos? So it's another challenge now. Okay, now, Marian, and I'm sure Kelsey runs into it too, that when you're going to be a part of something like Hell City Hotties, for example, do you find yourself comparing your ink to the other people's ink and saying, wow, they've got some really cool ink, or oh, my ink's cooler than that? Or do you think that plays a major part in how that voting goes and how that's determined?
I don't compare my ink to others at all, because everybody has their own story. They go to their own artists for their own reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So what they have is, I hope, what they wanted. I definitely admire the artwork that other people have, especially when they are with an extremely talented artist. But I don't compare it, because what I have is what I wanted. If I wanted something different, I would have gone to someone that had a different kind of talent. I don't compare ink. I might compare like the shape of the body and stuff like that, but that's that's a normal female thing.
or makeup.
We won't go there.
Or makeup.
Man, and then some of the makeup jobs, I'm just saying.
Girl, I know.
Let me fix your eyebrows. I'm just kidding. Not really.
Well, I did a shoot not too long ago where you have, that's the other thing that you mentioned about doing the eyebrows and stuff. Do you find, as a makeup artist, now we'll hit on the makeup artist side of things for you. Do you find it frustrating that sometimes models come to shoots, and Tim, you can chime in on this one too. Do you find it frustrating that they come and they're not prepared? They have their fingernail polish it's still half gone or whatever. They haven't cleaned up their fingers. They maybe have, God forbid, they have facial hair, or they haven't shaved their legs or whatever. Challenges you run into as a makeup artist and for us as photographers, Tim.
I personally don't care about the nail polish. That's because nobody's going to be paying attention to your fingertips. Not unless your hands are on your face and it's right up on your face. It bothers me when I want to word this right without coming across the wrong way. It bothers me when a model comes on set and she has the potential to make her photos come out 10 times better, and she either refuses to have her makeup professionally done, or she knows how to do her makeup and she doesn't know how to do her makeup. So there was a post that was made in a group that I'm in, and the girl posted it in the perfect, most respectful way. Your pictures and your sets can come out a million times better. If you don't know how to do your makeup professionally, it's worth it to invest in having someone do it for you. It makes a big difference. And there are some sets that I've seen, they're like, man, you would look 10 times better if your eyebrows were right. Or if you did just a little bit of eyeliner in just the right way, but to each their own, I guess.
Yeah. Now, Tim, do you typically have makeup artists that are there to help you with the models, or do a lot of them do their own makeup for you? And do you run into some of those challenges like she's referring to that you're like, oh man, this is not going to end well?
I don't work with makeup artists a whole lot. Most of the time, the people I shoot know how to do their own makeup and actually do a good job. I will, just because of the way infrared works, there are certain guidelines I can give in terms of, this color eyeshadow, don't use this type of lipstick, or let's just make sure that you're going to have a lipstick that is going to show up as opposed to looking like you don't have lipstick on at all. Facial hair and eyebrows, I can edit. It's not a real big deal, that stuff. There are certain things in infrared that make it easier to edit. One of the things I don't have to deal with is skin tone variations, generally speaking. So in color photography, if somebody's got a really good farmer tan going, those can be a real pain in the butt to try and make look even.
Right.
Sometimes you can't. But in infrared, generally speaking, I'm trying to think if I've ever had an issue where a difference in skin tones through sunburn or farmer's tan or anything like that. I don't think so. I can't think of one. It tends to get rid of freckles. It tends to smooth out some skin imperfections. If something's like is a mole or an acne scar, something that is deep or big enough to cast a shadow, that'll show up. But oftentimes, it's real easy to edit out if I need to. Stretch marks, that forbidden thing you don't talk about.
Right.
Those are generally fairly easy to edit out. It gets difficult to do if it's if they go through a tattoo, just because the way that it affects the ink, because then the ink is what's going to show the that scar. So
gotcha.
But it's not horrible,
right,
to deal with.
Okay, well, we're going to break away for a moment here. We're going to pay some bills with some ads and stuff, and we'll be right back with Tim and Marian. All right, we're back with Tim and Marian, and we've been talking about infrared photography. We're talking about being an alternative model, and we're going to get back into it real quick. Thanks again for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Tim's work is amazing. Marian's pretty cool too. We'll give her a plug there. She's all right. She cleans up
It's not
okay.
bad to look at.
Well, apparently you've got the really nice calves. So according to Marian, you got great calves.
No, those are my wife's.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's right.
No, her arms. Her arms are what does it, Tim.
Oh, is that what it is? Is that when she's got him in the headlock? That's where the the headlock with the arms. That's
Yeah, my wife is a competitive power lifter, so
she's pretty beast.
Yeah, that would scare me. I mean, I would be worried that if you come home and you're like, "What's for dinner?" and she says something, and you kind of turn your nose up at it, and then she's like, "Oh," you wake up a few hours later. So
No, she just say, "Well, then fix your own dinner."
Oh, okay.
All right. Well, Tim, as a photographer, where do you see yourself in 5 years, maybe 10 from now? I mean, what do you want to be doing, or where do you hope to be with your photography?
From a general standpoint, I hope I'm still alive. There's a lot of reasons for that statement, but
yeah.
From a photography standpoint, it's hard to say, because the infrared thing is cool and I like that. I've started shooting film again too, so I think it's mostly finding new things to do within the photography field and then trying it out and getting better at it. The infrared stuff is interesting in the sense that I have two goals that I want to do. There are about half a dozen to a dozen tattoo models around the world that I'd love to be able to shoot. A lot of them are in Germany.
There's a lot. There's a lot of tattooed models in Germany that are extremely popular.
Yes. And I've got a running list, and when I see new ones, I add there to the list. There are a couple male tattoo models over there too that I wouldn't mind photographing. I normally shoot women, but I'd like to expand that a little bit into the male tattoo male models, a bit more, and keeping it fun. I guess this is more of an avocation than a vocation. I've got a day job that I really love, pays me a good deal of money to do what I do, and by keeping photography as an avocation, I can then be a lot more selective in terms of how I approach projects, the types of things that I photograph, whether it's a personal project that I've got going on eyes and eye makeup, or just sort of general tattoo and photography and infrared, or doing something on film at night, which I did the other day, and hoping to see how that came out.
Is that the first time you shot at night, or is that just it was that particular concept?
First time I've shot on film at night.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I shot some higher speed color film, 1600 ASA Fuji film, and unlike digital photography, you can't really change your sensor sensitivity. So once you set it at a certain speed, you're stuck. So I did take a digital camera there with me to try and see how it was going to look. Made a few adjustments here and there on the camera, and we'll hope for the best and see how it does.
Well, yeah, film is very different than digital. I mean, I got my start in film photography. So, I mean, obviously...
As did I.
Yeah, from our perspective, it was, film is money. So you couldn't... You had to make sure you had it right, really when you were shooting, because you wouldn't know until you developed the film whether or not it turned out, whether or not you'd have to, redo something from a shoot or whatever, and that could be really kind of frustrating and time-consuming and financially, draining too, because you're like, oh man, I really kind of screwed it. I overexposed that whole roll of film, or that stuff didn't turn out the way I thought it would, or they were a blinker and you didn't catch them all, or something like that. So it's not as easy as people think, because I think people get a little lazy with the digital work.
And in infrared, it's even I think would be even more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Just because you don't have that instant feedback. You have filters that will cut 4 or 5 or 6 stops of light from your exposure, so you have to compensate accordingly. I do have some Ilford film that can be shot with infrared. It has sensitivity just up to the lower end of it, and so I'm going to try some tattoo portrait work on film, infrared film, in the studio when I get brave enough to spend a $10 roll of film to try that.
Well, I'm anxious to see how that turns out.
I'll give you the $10.
Okay.
All right, getting back to Mary now. Mary, we mentioned earlier that you're part of the Twisted Angels model group, and they've been around for a little while. We work together with that. And what do you tell us a little bit about what you do with them, because you're part of the leadership team? What are some of the things that you're doing with that, and what are your goals too? I mean, what are some of the things that you want to see yourself doing, as a model, in your own career? But are there things that include what you're doing with the Twisted Angel? You're like, hey, I'd like to be this with the Twisted Angels, and or I would like to be able to do move on and do something else. What are some of your goals?
I want to be able to do more traveling. And within the last year, I've been able to do more traveling. And it's getting better. Having 2 jobs makes it kind of hard, but my goal is, so with Twisted Angels, I am the global event coordinator. So what I do there is I help to create these events that our angels can go to all over the United States, but I also partner with some of our regional leadership ladies in like the UK and Australia, and it's just all over the world. So an example is, Hell City coming up in Phoenix. I'm helping to coordinate with Kiara Barnes out there to coordinate a Twisted Angel shoot, because a lot of our angels are out in Phoenix. But also we're going to be working the event with Seal the Deal. Seal the Deal is a tattoo aftercare company that we have partnered with recently to try to push sales, and then we're cross promoting each other. So we're letting people know about Seal the Deal, and Seal the Deal is letting us know about Twisted Angels. So it's a partnership. And then we're going to be trying to work a lot of other tattoo conventions all over the place. So there's a tattoo convention in Virginia Beach, August 10th. That weekend, I will be working that with Victoria Bones. Victoria Bones is going to be our regional leader for the East Coast, or at least she's going to be my right-hand woman to help me with it, because not only am I the global event coordinator, but I'm also the Southeast regional leader as well. So part of that is going to be recruiting new angels, and then trying to create partnerships amongst other, clothing lines, tattoo artists, aftercares, tons of different things. So my goal is to help grow Twisted Angels a little bit more. I want us to become, a positive name. The brand that I want to create for Twisted Angels is going to continue with what it's already got, which is, you hear Twisted Angels and you're like, oh man, that is a badass group. They've got some really awesome girls. If there's an event that's coming, I need models, or I need chicks to somebody to work this event. Who can I rely on to push my event or to push my brand? Twisted Angels. Okay, let me reach out to them. That's what I want. And then when somebody hears my name in the modeling industry, the first person, and I like to use this example all the time, is Heather Moss. You hear the name Heather Moss, and what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, first of all, she's freaking gorgeous, but everybody knows her. And there's nothing but positivity. You know, she's a boss lady. She's very business oriented. She's got an amazing mind for business. Her husband is an amazing tattoo artist. They own multiple businesses. She travels. She gets work done. She doesn't play games. She's very professional. So that's the brand that I'm building for myself, and I'm mentoring models along the way, and I'm doing a little bit of everything along the way. And, you know, my master's is in project management, so I'm using that towards my goals of doing a little bit of everything and just helping everybody, you know, succeed at the same time.
Yeah.
Does it answer your question?
Oh yeah. No, that was great. I mean, that's awesome because I mean we actually have the trip to Rhode Island here in a couple weeks too. So you know that'll be a fun trip too because we're actually recruiting some girls up there. We're working with Constantine Manos. I'm sorry, Constantine Manos up there. He has the Atomic Canary studio. He has one there in Rhode Island, and he also has another one down in Baltimore that he has a couple guys that he partners with down there. So, and Constantine's a really good photographer. He does a lot of nice work, and anxious. I've known him for years, and you know this is an opportunity to work with him. So, yeah, and I agree the traveling aspect, and I think you know again, Marian does a really great job in. There are days that I'll contact her and say, look, I'm frazzled. I've got like 1,000,001 things to do. And she'll say, well, you give me a couple things to do and I'll at least get a couple things off your plate for you. So, you know, and she's very organized and does the things that she needs to do. And that's why when we first talked about having her being part of the leadership team, it just kind of naturally progressed from being like the regional, you know, leader to somebody who's going to be helping out overall for the brand. And I think too with Tim and even with Kelsey helping out with the show and whatnot, we're putting together a really interesting group. I mean, it's something where we're not your average group. You know, we have a lot of diverse people that are within the group, and I think that's overall can be a very good thing, a very positive thing. And so in some respects, I mean, with Tim and I, because we've worked with people for a long time in this industry. Things have changed so much in terms of how models conduct themselves, you know, because it's so all of a sudden it's you have the Instagram models, the Insta models, and stuff like that people refer to that we kind of said that, you know, it's all great to have all these likes and all that other stuff, but unless that's kind of really translating into dollars for you, that doesn't do much for you. But we all sit here and we know that the ones that really matter are our peers, okay? The people that make an effort to work with us, okay? Marian makes an effort to work with Tim when she goes out to Arizona, all right? Tim makes an effort to clear his schedule so he can work with Marian because they know they can create a lot of great work together and stuff like that. And that's the culture we want to really have and create. We want people, like Marian said, we want people to think, okay, I need a model for this. I need an alternative model for this, and Twisted Angels are the way to go. You know, they're the people we want to do, whether it be a promotion or a shoot concept or whatever. So, you know, that vision and stuff that we do is really where Marian kind of jumps in, and she kind of jumped right into that and did that. And Tim, I love talking with Tim and stuff because we're very old school in a lot of ways. And I love his work. I mean, his work is amazing. So, you know, I'll do the bow down now and say, you know, I am not worthy kind of thing, you know, for the IR work.
His head is growing, Mike. Stop.
Well, I notice he's not fitting on the screen that well anymore. I only see his eyes and his forehead now. I don't see anything else. So, but
yeah, it's one of those things that one of the weirdest experiences for me was at one of the junkyard shoots I talked about. I think it was the 2017, the second one they had in 2017. I show up there and I'm shooting, and somebody hears my name and says, "Wait, you're Tim, the guy who does the infrared stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." You know, thinking, do I owe this guy money or something? He's like, "Wow, I follow your work. It's awesome. This is so cool. Wow, I can't believe I'm meeting you." I'm like, okay, I'm just, you know, this dude who...
It's rock star status.
A little bit different.
Tim, it's rock star status. You're going to have to start, you know, giving out autographs and stuff, too, next, you know?
It's just weird, but okay.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I'm really excited that we were able to pull Tim into our team. I was super excited. I was like, yeah, of course, we're gonna make him like our #1 Twisted Angels
infrared photographer. Yeah,
he's amazing and different, and you're my favorite.
Yeah,
I mean, you're my favorite infrared photographer.
Well, wait, he's
You're my favorite person ever, Tim.
But wait a minute, he's the only one. No, I'm just kidding. But it's. But no, that's true.
By the way, there is going to be there was an announcement made this afternoon that if anybody was ever interested in this junkyard shoot that we keep talking about, there will be another one on January 26th.
Oh, okay, awesome. Okay. Well, hey, as we get ready to wrap up, I do want to give Tim and Marian an opportunity. Please, give us your IGs or your website so people can check out your work. We're going to have them on our website. It'll be on the station website. It'll be on our Facebook page as well. But certainly, Tim, if you would, share your information, and we'll get Marian to share hers as well.
Yep. My website is timweaverphotography.com. My Instagram is at Tim_Weaver, WEA, V as in Victor, ER, _photography. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/TimWeaverPhotography. Surprise.
Yeah, hey, that's it's consistent. It's consistent.
Yeah, simple is good when people are looking, seeking you out or trying to. Simple is good.
Yeah. I have a lot of people.
Go ahead.
No, I have a lot of people that sit there and give me a hard time that my profile picture is just a blue eye, and I haven't changed it for years, but it's really easy to find me. If they want to find me on Facebook, I tell them it's Mike Liebner. Look for the blue eye. That's me. Because there's actually only a handful of Mike Liebners, and there's actually a Mike Liebner that's out in California that does photography, and he does more of the glamour and erotic work, and then he does some music stuff too out there. So. But yeah, it's always good to have something that stands out, something that's different, something that's easy to find and whatnot. So, Marian, give us your information. What do you got for us?
So, yep, my Instagram is at Mrs. Crowley 187. So it's MRSCROWLEY 187. And I have Snapchat. I kind of use it. I'm still trying to learn it. But my screen name for that is the same. It's Mrs. Crowley 187. And my Facebook, honestly, is primarily for my close friends and family. So you're going to see me on Instagram more than any other platform.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm too old for Snapchat, apparently.
Yeah, I don't use it. I mean,
you're not too old. You just don't want to use it.
Yeah, well, no, I'm in the same boat. I don't like the Snapchat. I know Bree does it. And a lot of the girls use it. I don't really use it that much. I don't see. I've got enough to worry about without having to try and keep up with Snapchat too. So let everybody else do that. So. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us for the show today. It was great. It was awesome, and we look forward to chatting with you guys again. And
thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys have a great day. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
All right, it is that time again. It is the end of the show. I want to thank Tim and Marian for being on the show. A lot of cool stuff with them today with the infrared photography.
Yeah, we learned a lot about a model's perspective with a photographer doing something new. That was cool. Thank you, Marian. This is Kelsey and Mike with the Twisted Hour on WBUZ 95.
And you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Twisted Hour. Y'all have a good night. Get twisted. And before we go, we want to say special thanks to Super Bob for letting us use their music, The Freak. They're awesome. If you guys get a chance, you guys got to check them out at superbob.com. They are awesome.
I've been dancing all night here.
All right. Good night, everyone.
I don't know.
Seven-figure grin from across the room. I see your patience are short with all these dancing fools. I see that you're the type of girl that likes a tattoo. I seen the way you looked at me when I came walking through. So don't hesitate, blow a single night, let them know. And don't let the night go, now don't let it go. Don't wanna be a street, I wanna make you scream. Come get it like a freak. Take my hand, we gotta do what we there. We'll hold up for the night. Just tell me what you like. I can see you're ready by that daddy look that's in your eyes. So don't hesitate, blow a single night left alone. And don't let the night go. Now don't let it go. Don't wanna hear you speak. I wanna make you scream. Come get it like a freak. Take my hand. We had it till we're weak. All night just like a dream. Come and get it like a freak. Take my hand. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak. I see that you know just what I mean. You grab my hand and quickly we go out through the back door. You lean into my ear, say that you're down for anything, no fear. Don't wanna hear you speak, I wanna make you scream. Come get it like a freak. Take my hand, be at it till we're weak. All night just like a dream. Come and get it like a freak. Break my hand. Don't wanna hear you speak. I wanna make you scream. Come get it like a freak. Take my hand. We had it till we're weak. All night just like a dream. Come and get it like a freak. Take my hand. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak. Like a freak, like a freak, like a freak.